Live from the Clarity from Chaos studios, heard worldwide, it's Dave Campbell. On every episode, Dave and his guests explore, discuss, and work on solutions to some of life's biggest challenges. So, if you're ready, be prepared to be enlightened, amused, and even shocked by what you hear. And now, the real, the authentic, the one and only Dave Campbell.
Welcome back to another episode of Clarity from Chaos. I'm your host, Dave Campbell. We are extremely fortunate to have back on the show the author of The Origins of Poverty and Wealth, Rainier Zitelmann. Rainier is a German historian, sociologist, and a multiple best-selling author of In Defense of Capitalism and Hitler's National Socialism. He has published over 27 books, which have been translated into 30 different languages. His articles have been seen in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Newsweek, and the Daily Telegraph. Welcome to the show, Rainier.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
My pleasure. So now that you've completed your 30-country tour, perhaps you could give the audience kind of a taste of your findings, of what you've seen out there.
Yes, thank you. Maybe I start first to tell your audience what I did. In 2022 and 23, I visited 30 countries, as you mentioned, all over the world. In Asia, for example, Mongolia, Nepal, South Korea, or Vietnam, and in a lot of Latin American countries like Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, Brazil, and Chile, Colombia. Of course, in the United States and in 16 European countries. And what did I do there? I spoke with entrepreneurs, with politicians, with economists, with ordinary people to find out the status of the economy. Why is it that some countries live in poverty and others not? This was one of the leading questions. And what I did as well, I have two PhDs, one in sociology, the other in history. And so before I visited these countries, I did two things. First, of course, I read a lot of books about the economic history of the country, because I think it's not possible to understand a country if you don't know the history of the country. And the other thing, I commissioned a poll in all these countries with one of the leading polling institutes in the world about the image of capitalism and the image of wealthy people. It was the biggest research ever done about the image of capitalism, because if you speak with some people, you have to know if this typical for what people think in this country or is it not. And so it was very important for me to have this research. And then I mixed it all together. Yes, the result. Maybe let's start with two countries comparing two Asian countries.
Sure.
One country is Vietnam. Vietnam was in the 90s the poorest country in the world. Poorer than all African countries. The GDP per capita was $98 a year. It was lower than Somalia, for example, or Sierra Leone. Because of, first they had this war, not only with the United States, with France, with Japan, with China. And what was not destroyed by the war was destroyed by the terrible socialist planned economy. So in the end, they were so very poor. Hunger and everything. And I visited Vietnam several times. And the interesting thing is that in the end of the 80s, they had high inflation rate, that real poverty everywhere. They started with free market reforms. They call it the Doi Moi reforms. It means opening of the economy, implementing private property and free market reforms, and a lot of free trade agreements with other countries like the United States. So opening the economy. The result is that the number of people living in poverty decreased from 80% in the 90s to 3% today. 80 to 3. Of course, Vietnam is not a totally capitalist country. They call themselves socialists today with the Communist Party, but don't believe it. I can guarantee you, I had lectures at 4 different universities in Hanoi. It's easier to find a Marxist at a university in the United States or in Europe than in Vietnam.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you, is that, obviously we went through the Vietnam War. and everything. And now they've embraced capitalism, embraced trade. And I would have to agree with you. There's probably more Marxists and socialists within our university system in the United States than there is in the entire country of Vietnam.
Absolutely. I give you one example. I speak at a lot of universities all over the world. In Vietnam, Foreign Trade University, they invited me for a workshop, read my books, they translated some of my books, and I have one book that is published in the United States by the Cato Institute. Maybe you know the Cato Institute.
Yes, sir.
The title of the book is The Rich and Public Opinion. And they translated the book in the Vietnamese language. And then they invited me to a workshop, and the topic was, how can we improve the image of wealthy people? Can you imagine to be invited by a university in the United States with a question, how can we improve?
No, they spend their entire time trying to put a fork in it, right? They absolutely despise people that have taken their gifts and created. For example, Bezos. Right now, we have this huge thing with Musk, where we're just absolutely vilifying the man for all of the great things that he's doing. And you'd think he was the Antichrist in this country.
Absolutely. And this is the difference. This is one of the results of my poll. I did one research about the image of capitalism, but another research about envy, how envious are people. I even calculated something that I call the social envy coefficient, that you see in some number how envious are people. And
sure.
Most envious people were, by the way, in France, number one. Followed, unfortunately, by my own country, Germany, number two. But, for example, in Vietnam and in Poland, rich people are role models, not scapegoats. They are role models. They love entrepreneurs, and they want to be like them. And this is a difference. And I think this is an important point. Some economists, I'm not an economist, I'm an historian and sociologist. I love economists, but sometimes they are too much only in the numbers. They don't understand how important are these cultural factors, like, do you admire the people or are you envious against rich people? This makes a big difference in a country. And in Vietnam, they have a very entrepreneurial spirit. Of course, in politics, it's not a democracy. It's a one-party system. There's no freedom of press, no freedom of speech. Even, for example, I published a book, How Nations Escape Poverty, another book that was now nominated for the Hayek book award from the Manhattan Institute. This book is published in a lot of countries, and it's a positive book about Vietnam, but I have problems to publish it in Vietnam because it's, of course, not according to the official line of the party. And I have other books, you mentioned it, in defense of capitalism. It's not possible to publish it there. I have books about, like, the psychology of the super rich. These books, they love it. They publish it. But in politics, it's not far away from being perfect. And also in the economy, they have a lot to do. But I will give you one fact. Maybe you know the Index of Economic Freedom. This is published every year by the Heritage Foundation. They do it since 1995. And for me, the most important thing when I study it every year, is the changes over a longer period, not from one year to another, but, for example, from 1995 to now. And if you analyze, there are 180 countries included in this index. And if you analyze which countries gained most scores in the Index of Economic Freedom, this is Poland and Vietnam, these both countries. For example, the United States, since 1995, lost 6 points. Vietnam gained 21 points. This is it's not so important. A lot of people, they make the mistake, they compare the countries. Where are the United States now, and where is Vietnam if you compare both? This is not important. Important is the change over time for one country. Is it going in the positive direction or in the negative? Do they lose economic freedom or gain economic freedom? And so this is one example, a positive example, Vietnam. Another one in my book is Poland, but I give you a very negative example, another Asian country. This is Nepal. Nepal is a country, maybe not everyone knows so much about this country. Everyone knows because the Mount Everest is a part of Nepal. And this is a country between India and China. And they had a long civil war with Maoists, and even today the president there is a Maoist, and there are 120 parties, but 80 of these 120 parties are Marxist, Leninist, Maoist, socialist. It's really crazy. So every kind of socialist, Maoist, Marxist, Leninist. And what are they doing? It's the second poorest country in Asia. Only Afghanistan is poorer than Nepal. And why is that? For example, it's not allowed to make a profit that is higher than 20%. For example, my publisher, if he publishes my book, he has to prove for the government how much cost is to produce the book, and then he can add 20% profit. If he would add more, he gets punished, or he has to bribe maybe the.
Is that tied, Rainier, to their religious respects, or is it purely politics, lack of wanting to be entrepreneurs, or anti-capitalists?
I don't know. I don't think that it's something has to do with their religion. You see, for example, in India, they had economic reforms. In a lot of other Asian countries that have the same religion, they had free market reform. So I don't think that it has something to do with their religion.
Then what do you think is driving, keeping them so suppressed?
So this is the question I asked all of them. And to be honest, today I don't understand. And I'll tell you why I don't understand. Because if you look what happened in their neighbor countries or in other Asian countries, I mentioned Vietnam, but also if you see Taiwan, or if you see, not to talk about Singapore, even in China, they had this, after Maoism, they had their economic reforms. The number of people living in poverty decreased because they introduced private property. Also in India. And what I don't understand, I asked them, for example, if you live here in a house that is in very bad shape, and you see all the neighbors build great houses around you, and why don't you think, why is that I live here in this house? For me, to be honest, I couldn't find an answer for this. But fact is, maybe they focus too much on things that are not important. For example, they had, I think, in the last 20 years or 30 years, 8 different constitutions. So they love to discuss days and days and years about new constitution, but they should more focus on the economy. What happens there? For example, one thing is also very important. It's the attitude to foreign trade and the attitude to foreign investors. You see a huge difference if I compare now Nepal and Vietnam. In Vietnam, they love foreign investors. They ask them welcome. For example, they love also Americans. Before I came to Vietnam, I thought maybe they are bad with Americans because of the war. No, not at all. Not at all. They love Americans. You see it in polls that if you ask them, they have a more positive attitude to the United States than, for example, people in France or in my country. Even because they had this war and they are open the economy. So they say investors come in, they understood that foreign investor is not bad, but it's good for them. And in India, it's exactly the opposite. They have a lot of restrictions. You are not allowed to invest in this and in that and in this and in that. And they have very high tariffs. So maybe Donald Trump should go there to see. Because
that was my next question, Rainier, is
maybe there are some Trump fans, and I'm not totally against him, but to be honest, I'm also not a fan. But one thing is really crazy what he said about tariffs. I saw this quote where he said, I think tariff is the most beautiful word in the dictionary. What sounds for me as crazy as someone would say, taxes is the most beautiful word in the dictionary. What is, of course, ridiculous. But there, he would love it because they have very high taxes, sometimes more than 300%. For example, I'll give you one example. A BMW from Germany, our car, that costs in Germany 80,000 euros or dollars. You have to pay there 400,000 dollars.
Oh my goodness!
Of course.
So they're using it. Yeah, they're using it as what is that barrier to entry, or
they see it as a luxury good. A car is luxury. And luxury is bad. Luxury is capitalism, and so we have to make high taxes because profit is bad, luxury better. This is this cultural things. In Vietnam, they think profit is great, profit is good. And in Nepal, they think profit is a bad thing and investors are bad. So this is what you learn when you are in different countries. Let me go away from Asia to Argentina.
I was just going to ask you about Milei.
Yes,
because to me, that's he deserves a Pulitzer Nobel Prize for what he has done with Argentina.
Absolutely, I agree, and I'm a little bit proud. When he won the elections, I know the editor of the most important newspaper in Brazil, and he sent me a WhatsApp message, and he said, "Rainer, you were the first one to tell me about Milei and that he could win, because I saw it in 2022 when I was there." Why? Not because, I tell you the reason why I saw it so very early. Do you remember I mentioned the polls that we did in so many countries about the image of the market economy?
Right.
And when I got the result for Argentina, first I thought maybe there's a mistake, because the attitude of people in Argentina to the market economy is very positive. And I wondered, is there a mistake? I asked the Polling Institute. There are parodies there. And then when I came to Argentina first time in 2022, and I spoke with the people from Milei's movement, I saw this is the biggest libertarian movement I saw all over the world, by far the biggest movement. And he did a lot of things much better. I know all these libertarians all over the world. I like them, but in a way, sometimes they are a little bit like cult, very dogmatic. They don't understand marketing. They don't understand PR. They talk too much about theory, not with emotion. There was someone else with a chainsaw, yes, and like a rock star, and also with beautiful women in his movement, also very important. So it made the movement very attractive. And I saw it in the poll that there's a change. And why is this so important? Because before he had the opportunity to become president, there was a shift in public opinion. And this shift came because there were a lot of think tanks. I know all these people from libertarian think tanks in Argentina, and they prepared everything. Of course, the situation was desperate in Argentina.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely desperate. But this doesn't lead automatically to a positive change. Before I come back to this, I will give you one other example. Venezuela was, in the 70s, one of the 20 richest countries in the world, and the richest country in Latin America. Then they started with regulation, and the situation became bad. But then they made a big mistake, not to elect Javier Milei, but Hugo Chavez. And he made the situation, of course, worse. Today, 80% of people in Venezuela live in poverty, from the wealthiest country to the poorest country in Latin America, and 30% fled from Venezuela. So, and by the way, also democracy was abolished. There's now a dictatorship, no freedom. So it means a negative situation doesn't lead automatically to a change. This is what some people think. And I tell them, I'm a historian. History is not like a Hollywood movie with a
good ending,
happy ending.
Right.
On the opposite, it can also always become worse, as you see. And also in Argentina, Argentina, a lot of people don't know about the history. 100 years ago, Argentina was one of the richest countries in the world, similar to the United States 100 years ago. They were very, very rich. There were even a saying like, you are rich like an Argentinian. And then they started about decades with their crazy Peronist politics, more government. And it took decades, and it became worse. So, and then, so if you want to change something in a country, you need two things. First, that the situation in the economy is very, very bad. This is a necessary condition, but not sufficient. You need another thing, that there's a shift in the public opinion. And this is why think tanks are what you're doing here, for example, what we are doing now, what I do when I write my books, what you're doing, why this is absolutely important. Of course, in the end, you need a politician, maybe an economist as Javier Milei with his chainsaw, maybe a Hollywood star like Ronald Reagan, who was for me the greatest president. I love him. Of course, you need something then.
Right.
But this is only the last thing that you're. So Argentina, and you can learn also something. I've been now every year in Argentina to support. By the way, I have to tell you a funny story. How I heard the first time about Milei. Some years ago. I have one book. It's also published in English. The title is The Power of Capitalism. By the way, I'm proud that Arthur Laffer, the great economist, wrote the preface now for the new edition. And I have a Google alert on my computer when my name is mentioned. Then I saw something in Spanish, what I couldn't understand, but I translated with Google Translate. And there was an interview with someone called Javier Milei, and they asked him, "What are you doing this afternoon?" And he said, "I go back home, going on reading the book from Rainer Seidelman, The Power of Capitalism." Oh, I thought, this is great.
There you go.
There's someone in Argentina reading my books. I love it. And this was the first time. Then, but there's one lesson, and this is what I told people in Argentina. I had a lot of lessons in Argentina, and I told them, don't expect that things will become better overnight. It will take a time. Things that were messed up about over decades can't be changed in a few months.
Well, and that's where we're at, Rainier, is we've gone through all of this malaise over the last several decades in this country. Trump's not going to be able to fix it in 4 years. It's going to take several people after Trump to continue rolling forward with the changes that he's making. Because, I think we had reached critical mass finally with the Democrat regulations and all of the other silliness that we were put through. Very much like everybody got put through Carter's years when Reagan took office. It was the same kind of thing. We went through the whole Biden silliness for Trump to come back, because I think people finally had enough of a lot of the silliness that were going on. I think in Germany, they're starting to do the same thing, are they not?
Absolutely crazy. Don't talk about this year's evening. No, it's crazy. Yes, I can tell you about Germany. It started with Angela Merkel to restructure first our energy industry in a kind of planned economy, like phase out nuclear power plants. The same they said absolute priority is to fight against climate change. It's ridiculous. If you think climate change is the biggest threat, you should have much more nuclear power plants instead of phasing them out. Then they phased out coal power plants. Then they forbid fracking, but now we have to import LNG fracking gas from the United States. It's all absolutely crazy. And now they do the same thing with the automotive industry. We were always very proud about our Mercedes, BMW, and Volkswagen. But no, they now in the European Union, they forbid they banned the registration of cars with combustion engines. It has all to be electric, and they started to change this. But people don't want to buy these cars. The other thing, the Chinese can produce these electric vehicles much cheaper than we Germans can do. The result is that they have now Volkswagen, for example, what was the biggest car producing company in the world. They have to lay off now 10,000 of people, and they are crying. Wow. This is always when politicians think that they are smarter than entrepreneurs and consumers. Don't get me wrong. I have nothing against electric vehicles. You want to buy electric car? No problem. But it should be consumers' decision, not by politicians. And this is the difference between capitalism on the one hand and on the other hand, socialism and planned economy. In capitalism, it's democracy in the economy. Every day, it's consumers' decision. When you use Google, for example, or you order on Amazon, you make Sergey Brin, Larry Page, or Jeff Bezos rich. If you don't do it, yes, down, it's consumers' choice. And the entrepreneurs decide what to produce, how much to produce. In socialism, politicians decide. And so I tell people, I can't understand why someone is pro-socialism, but it means nothing else that you think that politicians are the smartest people on the world. And how could you think that they are the smartest people on the world? They are not, of course. The millions of consumers and entrepreneurs are much smarter. And this is what happens. And let me only finish something for Germany. It's all about, climate change. And if you told them, here, by the way, Germany, we are only responsible for 2% of CO2 emissions of the world. Even if you would reduce it to zero, it would change nothing with the climate.
Right.
Yes, maybe, but we are then the role models for everyone else, and all other countries will copy what we are doing. But now exactly the opposite is true, because we have the 3 years of recession and our economy is in bad shape, and we are only, like a negative example for others. Don't do it like Germany. So it's exactly the opposite what they told you.
Yeah, you don't want to be the poor example.
Yeah, but that's what happened now.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna ask you about the EU, because they seem to be stepping on their own feet all the time. I mean, at one point, nuclear power was predominantly, in Europe, there were numerous nuclear plants. In the United States, they were fighting it to not do it. And now all of a sudden, our nuclear program is starting to catch wind again. And the EU now is falling behind.
There are some examples. In France, I don't like the French politics but in one thing they are good. They rely, I think, more than 70% on nuclear power plants. This is
right.
This is one good thing. No, but to sum up, I've been in so many countries, and to make a long story short, you see, in the end, it's very simple. Imagine like the economy as a test tube with 2 ingredients, like capitalism and socialism, or like free market and government. And if you add more free market in the test tube, things will happen like in Vietnam, reducing poverty from 80 to 3%. If you add more government, things will be like in Venezuela, for example. People, in the end, it's so really simple, and the problem is that people don't know history.
Well, they quit teaching it, Rainier. They quit teaching history. They've focused history on their own ideologies as opposed to actually teaching history the way history is actually unfolded, right? I mean, they would hold up Venezuela as some kind of role model. But to your point, Venezuela was very, very wealthy and doing things great. And then all of a sudden they decided to become a socialist country and they went right down the crapper. They don't talk about that from a history standpoint anymore.
Yes. And the problem is, after a socialist experiment failed, as in Venezuela, they tell you always the same story. Oh no, this wasn't real socialism. In the beginning, they're enthusiastic. I remember in the end of the 90s or the beginning of 2000, when Hugo Chavez came to power, there were so many intellectuals, also in the United States and Europe, they praised the socialism of the 21st century. And then they had an inflation rate 1 million %, and then all the people, there were more and more poverty. And then if you confront them, no, this wasn't real socialism. And if you asked them, where is your socialism? Where can I see it? They show you a book. Here, it's in the book. But no, you can't compare a book with reality. It's like if I would compare your marriage with a romantic love novel. Of course, what would you say? Yes, you come home and your wife says, we have to divorce because I read this romantic love novel and our marriage is not like it is there.
Yeah, exactly.
Here it's crazy. Please compare it with our friends and neighbors, and then it's good. And this is what I do in my books. I compare things that without theory. I only compare, for example, as we spoke, Poland or Vietnam, how was it in socialist time, how it is now, things that you can compare, not the theory with
exactly.
And the problem with socialism, in theory, sometimes socialism sounds good, or on paper it sounds good, but not if the paper is a history book. And because if you study history, and the problem is, I had one test question in all of my lectures. I had so many lectures all over the world. And I asked my audience in every country one question. Have you heard about the biggest socialist experiment in history? This was Mao Zedong's so-called Great Leap Forward from 1958 to 1962. 45 million people died. 45 million people. This is the first chapter in my book, The Power of Capitalism. And wherever I ask this question, whether I've been in Asia, in the United States, in Latin America, and Europe, only very few people raise their hand. They haven't heard about it. They know nothing about it.
No,
and
exactly.
Because at university, at schools, they don't teach about it. And I think it's a tragedy. It's so crazy, you know?
Absolutely. So where can people find the origins of poverty and wealth, Rainier? Just
if they can find it on Amazon, for example, I think also Barnes & Noble, you can order the book, and also the other books that I mentioned, In Defense of Capitalism, The Power of Capitalism. You find a lot of books, and I really would appreciate if you read it, or if some people read it. Please do a review on Amazon, so because this is so very, very important.
Oh, absolutely. We've been talking to Rainier Zeidelman, who's the author of Origins of Poverty and Wealth. And it's been an extremely, extremely good pleasure to talk to you. I really appreciate you taking the time, because I know there's a several hour difference in where we're at and where you're at. So I appreciate you taking the time.
Well, it's not too late. The only thing, I'm happy to go now to my TV, because there's a talk show, and the person I coached yesterday to do it good, an entrepreneur, is now on TV, and I want to see whether she does good or not. But I told no, I can't see it now, because I promised I have this interview. I always keep my promise. It's a pleasure, and I hope to be invited next time.
Absolutely.
We have a lot of other topics, so thanks a lot, and send me, please send me the I liked your question, I liked your talk. Please send me the link that I can post it on my social media.
Absolutely, Rainier. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. I'll be back.
Okay.
Thank you for listening. If you would like to listen to more Clarity from Chaos shows on demand, go to clarityfromchaos.buzzsprout.com or send Dave an email at info@clarityfromchaos.com for information on previous shows. You can also listen to the show on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Twitter, or Google Podcast. Until next time, please remember, it's not about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. Be well, everyone.